Hey guys, this is Waldie 191 here. This video is a session I played against IGetMonies on Revolution. We played 5 games, 2 at a time. He wanted to make his debut video against another reg, so I recorded from my end also. Lately I've switched my focus to Hyper Turbo games, and this took place at Turbo, so I may be a little rusty. I went 0-5, but I still think I played pretty well and can share some insight to hopefully help you improve. So let's get started. Tim Ford's good enough to open. I like to 2.5x over 40 big blinds. Jack 6 is at the bottom of my readless flatting range. I can safely assume he is opening a smaller range to me at this stack depth. I would also expect him to c-bet this flop 100%, especially except for probably 3x. I decided to bet this when he checks back. I decided to bet the turn with my gutter ball, no showdown value, because A, it could easily hit my range, and B, I think his range is very weak, so I plan to barrel many rivers. I also would assume he would c-bet Jack 9 on this flop and 6-9, but I have a 6, so 6-9 is unlikely. I think the 5x, when it comes, he calls, and I think the 5x on the river isn't a great card to barrel, but I think it pretty much misses his range also. So I think it's better than giving up. Also, I don't think he has many 2-pair type hands here because of the line he took. Maybe 3-5 suited, but that's about it. I also think he would have raised the turn or c-bet 7-8. So we bet, I think, what I bet, 115. I think that's okay. When he calls here, I was surprised to see what he shows. Showed 8-3. Now we can assume he's probably opening any 2 cards, but I think it's a mistake to flat this turn. I think the flop check back is fine, but the turn needs to be raised. I mean, in my opinion, it's a mistake not to, but whatever. A little unlucky, being the 8, and I think our logic was fine based on what we know. We go ahead and 2.5x here. He pot 3 bets, I believe. Yeah. It's worth noting that he did the pot size, because I know that I have different 3-bet sizes and what they mean. Like, I'm potting my bluffs, and I'm also potting like hands that I want to get it in with, like pocket 8s. I'm potting stuff like that, and then I'm not potting like aces, kings, queens, jacks, 10s probably, and also my like ace 10, king queen, stuff like that. And I don't know, does he do this also? I don't know that yet. So, pretty standard call here. And we just go ahead and give up on this flop. I mean, we don't have any equity really, so can't really rep much. Jack 6 is a pretty standard open. Standard half pot c-bet. It's a beautiful turn to barrel. But he probably knows that, but I still think it's fine. We're just 3 hands in, so, or whatever. I think the river's a good barrel card too, and I think the size was fine. I was quite sure he had a weak range, because I'm thinking on this flop he pretty much has to raise a flush draw, queen x, 4-4, queen 8, stuff like that, just because it's so wet. And I think he probably 3-bets some ace 10 plus for sure, probably ace 9 pre. So obviously he knows that we know what good barrel cards are. So we have to adjust for this by maybe barreling sometimes when it's not an obvious spot for it down the road. But here I think it's good. 10 jacks of flat. As it turns out, he heroed us with king 8. I mean, that's fine. We just gotta. He obviously knows that we know that ace was a good barrel card on the turn, and so that probably is why he called that. Planning to check raise with the 10 jack when he c-bets. He checks back again, and I would still expect this to be a weak type of showdown range, meaning more towards like 6x, 3x, instead of ace 8 plus, king queen, stuff like that. Therefore, I don't expect this turn to hit him a ton, and the board is pretty wet, so I bet for value. Also, he knows I'm capable of firing air here. And I think 50's standard size, it's fine. I checked the river in case he did bink a queen and decided to flat it, even though it's wet, and also to induce a bluff if he has one of the many misdraws. Now he's tanking big time, so that kind of makes me think if he bets, he's pretty strong. I decided to call, even though all signs, honestly, like the way he did everything, it points to a misdraw probably, but it just felt strong because he took so long and then bet that much. Like he almost bet pot. And so anyway, I decided to call. I mean, I have a super strong hand, really. Basically for the reasons I talked about earlier. 4-4 is a standard flat, and he shows queen 6. He did bink the queen and flat it, and check back second pair on that flop, which I'm not a big fan of. But anyway, I think we played fine, and unfortunately, the queen hit him. It's also worth noting that he tends to flat to kind of trap in spots where I don't think it's great to be doing it a ton, but whatever. Just that's something to remember for future analysis. 4-4 standard flat. I decided to flat his c-bet because it's super dry, and he should be c-betting like 100% here. I decided to fold the turn. But looking back, I think it's a call. He obviously knows it's a good board to barrel, and he knows that I check raise king X there probably, and is capable of definitely checking back, even maybe king X, on such a dry board, since he knows I'm capable of probing air. Ace 4. I meant the 2.5x, but I thought I had 755 instead of, or I thought I had under 800, but I had like 900 or whatever. It's not a huge deal, but it's just worth mentioning. I meant to make it 50. I decided to check back the flop because it's super wet, and I have some showdown value, and I think it hits his range pretty hard. I just give up if he bets the turn here, which I believe he does. Yeah, and there's no point. I don't really have much equity, so I just let it go. It's also worth noting that I haven't 3-bet pre-flop yet. Just something to keep in mind. Super standard, pretty much so far. King 4 standard flat. It's especially to a min, and he's opening super wide, whatever. Pretty standard. I'm check raising here. Just got to start thinking about size. I decided to go with, I think I went with 115. I wanted to go as big as I could without it being 3x. Just because, no real reason. It's just I think if I do 120 there, it probably looks a little stronger, maybe. I'm not real sure about that, but that was my logic. So anyway, I think he just folds. But it's worth noting, I think his C betting range may be becoming pretty weak overall. I just decided to go ahead and give up on the queen, queen, queen flop. When he donks here, I have nothing, and I think that flop hits him pretty well. So I just decided to give it up. 10-5 standard raise pre. I'm going to be raising 10-4 here also. 10-3 I'm folding off. Any suited I'm raising pretty much. Maybe not 9-3 or 9-2, 7-3, 8-3, stuff like that. But pretty much. But as far as offsuit 10s, I'm raising them down to 10-4. Anyway, he's been somewhat tight in the big blind, so I would say his range on that flop is somewhat on the weaker side, but I can't be sure just yet. Just mainly because I think he's 3-betting. I would assume he should be, although I'm starting to think not, but he should be check raising like his flush draws, ace X, some straight draws. Just because I think that's better than check calling, because then what are you going to do on the turn like here? Check call again, then what, So anyway, he didn't, so I would, as a default, I'm going to assume that he's probably pretty weak. And the 10 of spades comes as a gin card for us. Because he's going to give like 9x more value, and if he was like trapping with ace X, stuff like that, he's going to roll out a 10 of our range, so that's why it's good. I think I should have bet 100, because I think he knows I would do that with air when barreling, so since we had the nuts, I should probably bet it like I would if I had air. But he also knows that this is a bad barrel card for us. And that was my logic at the time. I decided on the river to bet, let's see, I think I bet like 225 maybe. Yeah. I think we played fine here size-wise. He could definitely have ace X or like hero 6-6 or something crazy. And I think I probably would have taken the same line with air had I decided to barrel. One second. Okay. I think I've... One second. And anyway, he falls, so. King 7 here, I flat, pre. It's pretty standard. He checks back the flop, and I'm assuming he's c-betting all his air here like he should. So when he doesn't, I decide to check call the turn, because I think he's only calling if I'm beat. And if he calls, then on almost any river I'm going to be in a tough spot. So I decide to check. I decided to check call the turn. This 4-5 suited, I decided to 3-bet. because I hadn't yet. And 4 or 5 suited works well for that. Also, I didn't do pot because we're only like 28 deep, 30 deep, so I want to do a little bit just under. So then, on the King 7, given the fact that I think his range is relatively strong, I think it's another check call. He could easily think my range is very capped and the King X is bad for me. Even though I have the King of Hearts and that takes away some flush draws he could have, I still think bluff catching is the best line here. The reason why I said his range is relatively strong is because I would think he would c-bet all his air on this flop. He should. I mean, it's a perfect flop for it. But anyway, I check and he gives up. When he shows, he thought about it. When he shows Queen 3, I'm kind of shocked. Honestly, I like I said earlier, I think this is a perfect flop to c-bet like every time, and it's not good to not. But whatever. King 10, standard min-range pre, c-bet a pretty draw flop, and he flats. Now I'm starting to notice his fold versus c-bet percent is 0. So that's worth noting. Given the fact that he floats like any 2 cards here, and probably, given the fact that he floats any 2 cards here, and the turn isn't a good barrel card, I decided to barrel. Because I think he thinks I would check that turn all day long if I had air. And also if he calls, which he's shown he's capable of very wide on the turn also, I'm planning to barrel a ton of rivers as a shove. Because the stack's set up perfect for it. We'll come back to this King 5. It's interesting too. So he calls and he checks to us on the river and it's a 6x, or 6 of hearts. I think it's a great river to shove. The only real 4x I'm worried about is ace 4, and I think he probably wouldn't have check called every street with that. I'd say he's likely not flatting 4-5, 3-4, 7-4, etc. pre. So I pretty much think it's a clear shove. So I do, and he folds. Now, on this King 5 hand, standard flat pre, standard flop flat, and then reevaluate. I'm assuming he likely connected in this flop, with this flop, based on the fact that he c-bet almost instantly, and the board texture. So we flat. When I binked the 5, I decided to lead into him, which I think he would interpret as me wanting to see the river for 120 with a hand like 6x, 8x, flush draws, maybe even 7x, since he probably knows I'd check raise 8x on the flop. So he flats, which I thought was strange. But he could flat 8x here, I suppose, even though I think he shouldn't. He's shown he's capable of stuff like that. And when the 4 clubs comes, it doesn't really scare me too much. I think 6x jams, flush draws jam the turn, so I bet for value, especially since he might hero on me with like anything. When he flats, see, we decided to go, what did I go with? Like 240. No, yeah, 270. And when he flats, I'm quite sure that we had the nuts. And then he turns over 8-6. And like, when he binks that here, I mean, it looks like a genius and stuff, but I think overall it probably was a mistake to flat the turn there. I wouldn't have. I mean, in this exact spot, it worked perfect, but I just think, given the board and the texture, and I guess he just somehow knew that I had the nuts, but whatever. I think it should have been shoved, but that's fine. It was a nice hand. Here, for a while, he gets disconnected, so I'm just going to fast forward through that. Although, before I do, I just want to say that on this hand, right, I don't know if it was because he got disconnected or what, but he flatted Queen 6 pre, which is fine. We raised Jack 5, and he flatted Queen 6 on a Queen 6 King hard heart flop. And I don't know if it was because he got disconnected or what, but I ended up making a note because I think he was doing it to try to trap, which I don't know if... I think it's pretty bad on that board. I just think you miss out on so much value, and it weakens your check raising range when you do check raise. It's just... I don't know. I almost never do that. But anyway. So let's just go ahead and skip past all the disconnect. Okay. I decided to fold that just because I didn't know. I don't know much about his ranges and whatever, and I still think it's standard as a fold at, 17 deep or whatever, so I just don't see the need in 3-bet jamming just yet. I don't know his ranges there. A7 standard min raise, and I decide to check it back on this flop. He ISO shoves over my 9-10. I'm assuming that obviously he could have like 10-7, 10-6, King 6, a bunch of good hands, but he also could have like Jack Queen, Jack 9, maybe a heart, maybe like pocket. I don't know if he would 3-bet shove pocket 2s or not here. So he could have that and just think that I hate that board and will fold my air. So I decided to call because I think he's probing super wide, and I mean he's been doing it every time that I check. So, and then when he checks, I figure it could be Jack Queen or Big Heart, and unfortunately it's 6-7. So I mean we were fortunate there too a little bit, but sure didn't miss anything. That's a fold, I think. Or I'm pretty sure. It's a jam. And we just get unlucky. He's got King 10, really. I mean, that's all there is to it. I decided to shove the King 6 here. I'm pretty sure he's opening a little too wide. I have a tight image for that right now too. He's probably, like I said, he's probably min raising a little too wide if I had to guess. And I think King 6 off's better than flatting in this spot, so I go ahead and shove. Same thing with the twos. $10-3, I'm open raising. 2.5. Now with the Queen 7, I know he's ISOing wide, but I'm going to keep lipping hands like this just to keep that type of range. I'm also going to mix in like 8-8 plus to try to trap. I might also start shoving like King 4, King 5, King 6, stuff like that. Stuff that I think is going to play better when I shove versus, which is still, like, I'm talking about, like, at 18 deep, I'm not going to open shove that, but when we start getting to, like, 14, 13, stuff like that, I think it's okay. Just because I think he's ISOing me super wide, so I think that's one way to help stop that. But more importantly, I'm going to start mixing in, like if I had kings here, I'm going to limp that too and try to trap. Now the 5-7, I decided to go ahead and 3-bet here. Pot sized is my big size with the bluffs. This deep. I haven't been doing it a whole lot, so you know we have this pretty tight image there. He flats. We flop the nuts. And I'm definitely c-betting here. No, I mean all day long. It's just a matter of how much. I decided to do 130. I think 140 might have worked better, but as long as it's a little bit over half pot, I think that's fine. On the 7-8 suited, I believe I jammed. Yeah, just because he's wide and he's opening like 75% around 14, 15 deep, and I think that's way too wide. Like, he hasn't flatted yet, so he's got a bunch of stuff. And his, like, if you ran the whatever Insane Steve thing, I think it's perfectly fine. So we c-bet the flop and he calls. I think the 9 spades kind of sucks for us, but he could have floated 9x, so not all bad. I also would assume he knows he should probably raise with 4-4, 6-6, 8-6, 8x, 7-9, or flush draw on that flop. So I decided to check the turn. My logic at the time was I thought I could get him to bet most of his range since a lot of it couldn't win at showdown. And looking back, I think it may have been better to shove the turn over his, like, I got him to bet, which is what I wanted. And looking back, I think it may have been better to shove the turn here. But I'm not totally sure about that. I think, obviously, if another spade comes for us, it sucks. But he may be bluff shoving it enough to make it okay. Obviously, assuming we're calling that river bet. And that's if we call here and a king of spades comes on the turn and he shoves. We checked, whatever. But like I said, I think this is... I'm not sure what would be best here, honestly. I've thought about it, and I guess it depends on how much of this range has air in it, obviously, and how much he's going to be trying to steal the river and all that stuff. But as played, I decided to check call and then standard c-bet here, just under half on a paired board like that. It's fine. So yeah, I mean, looking back, I don't hate my line, given that I think his range is pretty weak overall. So I check here. I'm snapping off anything. And he ends up checking back, which obviously sucks for us, but Yeah, so he shows Queen 8 suited, which I honestly can't believe he had Queen 8 suited there. Like, I think it's fine as far as bottom end of flatting range pre and all that, but I think on the flop, flatting here is pretty bad. I really do. Anyway, whatever. Interesting hand for sure. I would just think if I had that and he had what I had, we're getting it in on the flop every time. Just because you're going to put yourself in so many tough spots on the turn when they barrel overs. And even if he knows I'm barreling overs, it still hits my perceived range, which, I don't know. I just... Plus it's wet. Whatever. I don't know. I think it could have been played better. But anyway, moving on. We still won a nice spot, which is good. He 3-bets here again to pot, and I decided to fold because it was pot size, but more importantly, he's only 3-bet like 13% so far or something like that, right at that. And he's probably 3-betting wider than that, but it's still a very tight range. Queen 9 suited I would have called, Queen 8 suited I would have called, Queen 10 off I would have called. I just think Queen 9, it might be a call, it's close. It just depends on how much you think he's mixing in bluffs now, which I think he is, but I don't know. I thought it was close, and I think folding is a little bit safer or what have you. I don't think it's terrible, but the 8-9's standard flat pre. Dry board, and he checks back again. It's not super dry, but pretty dry. So I'm betting the turn for value here. The same as I did when I had air. And we shove 10-8, and he has ace king, unlucky. I think that's pretty standard. So yeah, he checked back the flop and then totally gave up. Worth noting. Or just being aware that he's capable of that. On this hand, I decided to check back the flop. I think he would donk ace-x and stronger, and I also think he is folding his air. So I decided to check back, and I think his range consists mainly of air and king-x. And I have outs if he does have king-x, so I can bluff catch if he probes his air, which he does like every time. And I also had the flush draw. So that's why I checked back. And then he probes the turn, which I was expecting, so I call. And it's kind of a bad card for us, really. He ends up betting like, I can't remember, something over pot. Yeah, 375. And it kind of confused me a little bit, given the fact that he's shown he's definitely capable of checking ace-x to me, even though I think leading's probably better. He's also making this bet to look like an overbet bluff that's begging for a call, I think, and I really can't beat much. I think I have to fold. He could have all types of stuff here, from a flush to a ton of 2-pair hands, maybe even 10-jack. So I just decided to muck it because we have to be right here like so often, or a lot more than if he'd have bet like 100, obviously. But since it's bigger than the pot, it's gonna have to be right a lot. And I don't think we would have been ahead that much, so I decided to fold. I decided to check back this flop also. If I knew he was leading his bag hands, I might c-bet and plan to barrel the turn in river when like this came overs that aren't hearts. But he might be flatting like 6x or something. So even though I know he's probably probing this turn super wide, I don't really want to flat and just draw to a weak flush or overs. And if I miss any checks, I don't think I'll get credit for much if I try to steal. So I just give up.